when the sky is high. No reason to stay on ground. Lift your hands and you can catch and fly.
Hello and welcome to the Aviatrix book review. I'm Liz Booker. Today I'm discussing another book for young Aviatrix readers. My guest today is the author of 4 books for young readers, including the middle grade mystery novel, The Amelia Six, an Amelia Earhart Mystery, which Kirkus Reviews describes as a cozy whodunit that cheerfully affirms girls' and women's contributions to aerospace. And you can find her at her website, KristinLGray.com. Kristin L. Gray, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. I see your t-shirt,
Yes.
Let Women Fly. I love that. And I've got my 99s t-shirt on, so we're ready to go for this.
Great.
So before we get started talking about it, do you want to just give us an overview of the story so people know what they're getting?
Sure. I am the author of The Amelia Six, an Amelia Earhart Mystery for kids. It's geared for middle grade readers, ages 8 to 12. The protagonist is Millie Ashford, and she has won a nationwide contest along with 5 other girls to spend the night at Amelia Earhart's childhood home in Atchison, Kansas. And Millie's mother is a pilot, and so all of the girls have aviation ties, but they spend the night at the museum, and Amelia's flight goggles go missing, her famous ones that she wore on the transatlantic crossing. So, which they actually really did go missing in real life. So, which maybe we'll come up with that later in our interview.
This book was sitting on my shelf already. And then at the beginning of the school year, my son came home with his 4th grade reading list, and it was on it. And I was so excited. I was like, okay, now this goes to the top of my pile. And we both read it, and I loved it. But more importantly, your target audience, who is 9 years old, loved it. You threw him for a loop. He didn't know. He suspected somebody else was the culprit in stealing the goggles. And so, yeah, he told me to tell you that he loved the book. So
awesome. And shout out to his 4th grade class, Miss Menudis. Awesome. Thank you for including it on your reading list.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your background and why you write for children.
Okay. I was a pediatric nurse in my past life, and I ended up staying home after I have 5 children. After my 2nd son was born, I kind of segued into technical writing for medical software. And that just wasn't, I just wasn't loving writing user help manuals. And I started, at that age, I was starting to read with my children. They were teaching them, I was teaching them to read as they were getting older. And I just remembered how much I loved children's books. I was a big reader as a kid, not a big writer. I didn't really love writing, which is funny, but I devoured stories. I was the one my parents would have to sneak in, turn off my light, I'd fall asleep with my glasses on. And I just loved it. And I think children's literature usually ends with a sense of hope or a promise of good things to come, where you don't really find that in grown-up books always, or films. And I just thought, I think I'm gonna try this. And so I did. It took me a really long time to break into the industry, about 7 years. And I was fortunate enough that I could stay home, during that time. But I really did. I took my daughter, my daughter's the youngest. Her kindergarten year is the year that I took off, and I just stayed home, and I thought I'm gonna just treat it like a job. And so I did. And by the end of the year, I had the beginning pages of what would be my first novel that actually was published. Lots of practice novels, right?
Right. I feel you. Trust me. Well, congratulations. That's so great. And it's so great that you decided to bring our aviation history into one of your novels. So tell me about the inception of this book. Where did you get the idea for it?
Okay, funny. My first idea for the book was actually kind of a picture book biography on Amelia Earhart, which there's so many biographies on her that exist, but I thought I'd found like a new little niche that no one has really talked about. So I live about 5 hours away from Amelia Earhart's home. And so my husband and I conned him into a little weekend getaway trip, and we zipped up there, and once I met the caretaker who actually lives there in house and saw the house, I realized the story was so much bigger than what I had set out to write. And the story I'd set out to write, I don't think would have been very interesting to children. It was about her, sewing line and how she was the first celebrity, if you will, to have sponsors with her, luggage line and clothing. And she was in department stores. And, I'm like, kids don't care about that. So, but the house just kind of screamed Clue type mystery to me. It was kind of creaky and old, and it just gave off those vibes. And plus the history alone was incredible.
So author Barbara H. Schultz is an author who's written about extensively about aviation history. She's written a book about Poncho Barnes, but she has a lot of the memorabilia, like the suitcases, the Earhart suitcases and stuff like that. And she's done some writing on that topic too. So that's really cool.
Oh, that is really neat. Yeah.
Well, so was it your proximity to the Earhart house that piqued your interest about her? Like, what led you to want to write even a nonfiction book about her?
I think she was just like one of my big heroes when I was a kid. I mean, I guess pretty much Amelia Earhart and Helen Keller, when I would be assigned book reports, in third grade or fourth grade, that's, I guess, just women who do daring, brave things, who break the mold, shake things up, have just always been exciting to me. And just their spirit of adventure. I'm kind of a big fraidy cat on the inside. And it's just really inspiring to me to read about these amazing women.
I always find it, I was a search and rescue helicopter pilot, and the crewman in the back, the rescue swimmer, was our EMT qualified crew person. And I'm always amazed when I hear nurses say things like, "Oh, I could never do that." My policy was never look back.
Oh, right.
I'm going to fly the plane because I can't handle what's going on back there. So you talk about being a fraidy cat, but we all have our different things.
Yeah, it takes all types. I guess you just kind of get in the zone and do what you have to do at the moment.
Yeah, and especially as a pediatric nurse, that would be really tough. Yeah.
Well,
So you talked a little bit about going to the museum and realizing it was a bigger story. So tell me about the research, what you discovered, and if anything surprised you.
Oh my goodness, the research was the absolute best part. And I have a whole little row of, Amelia and Friends books. And also I live about 30 minutes away from Bentonville, which is where Louise Thaden was from. And she graduated from the University of Arkansas. In fact, I bought this shirt at Thaden Field. We have a little airport named after her. And of course, she and Amelia were wonderful friends.
Before you go on, I just want to mention, so I told you via email that I'm going to be the master of ceremonies for the book launch tonight of the Beyond Haiku Women Pilots Write Poetry series. And I sent you the article that talked about Amelia's previously unpublished poems, but there are also poems by Louise Thaden in there.
Oh, Louise. Okay, I'll have to read it. I pulled it up from the WashPo, but I need to finish reading it. Yeah. Okay, I'm so excited for this. That sounds fabulous.
Thank you. Well, you were talking about the research, so tell me more.
Yes, so that was part of it, was connecting with some local 99 members here too. But no, I ended up making 2 research trips to the house, and the original caretaker that I met in 2015, 2016 is no longer there, but she was there when I was a kid. So she lived there over 30, maybe 40 years. And she had seen and heard everything, every possible theory that, you could come up with on her disappearance. And she's really the one that just opened my mind and made me realize what could be possible. And I had so much more to explore and learn. And anyway, it was fabulous. And then the University of Purdue has digitized their entire archives. And so you could spend weeks digging through personal letters between, Amelia and her husband. And anyway, it was just, I could research all day long and never get around to the writing. It's my favorite part.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love research too. You know, one of the things that I thought you did really well in this book, and it's something that even just at the beginning of my writing journey, I knew I wanted to do well, and it was a focus when I went through my master's program of making sure that I was able to do that, is kind of teaching while you're writing without being heavy-handed about it. And the way that you crafted this book, so it starts off with a scavenger hunt once they get settled in the house and everything, and they're given these questions that they have to hunt around the house about Amelia and her trip, and not just the trip, but other things too. And they have to hunt around the house for clues about how to answer them. And I thought that was a really clever way to share the history without being heavy-handed about it.
Oh, thank you. Well, and you had asked me earlier, like, what surprised me as I was researching. Well, I had no idea. Of course, I loved that she was a nurse. I had no idea Amelia Earhart was a nurse. And during the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, she lived in Toronto, and she was actually in medical school for a little while at Columbia, and I had no idea. And then just the of course, I knew, being women at a time where women were not in aviation, there were bound to be countless hurdles, but just what they had to go through, and the sabotage, the rumors of sabotage at the first national air race, having to, and how ingenious and resourceful these women were, filtering the fuel through their nylon stockings. I love that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to work that into the book somehow, even though these, kids today might not even know what stockings are, nylon, hose. But I just thought that's incredible. And then Amelia crash landed in Arizona, a cactus poked through her wing. And so she took her sewing knowledge and then literally patched her wing back together with a needle and thread. It's just amazing to me. Yeah.
Those are such great details. And I loved also that you included the 99s, which still exists,
Yes.
as you know, because you met some of them locally. What did you learn from them? I mean, you kind of talk about the history in the book, which is really cool, so kids have that too.
It is amazing. And the scholarship opportunities that they offer for young women, and the Girls in Aviation Day, I guess that might be Women of Aviation that put that on. It's just so important, and it's just so inspiring to hear their stories and how they each come to aviation in different ways. Some might have family members, or some are just a childhood curiosity, kind of, like what I experienced with Amelia. It's just really fun. Everyone's story is personal and as unique as they are.
Yes, thank you. That is sort of a pillar of all of the things I'm doing right now, both sharing the stories that have already been written
Yes.
by pilots from diverse backgrounds, women in aviation, but also encouraging those women who have those incredible stories, especially sort of we call them our unintentional pioneers, to find a way to tell that story either themselves or to find somebody to help them write it. So that's kind of the whole point of all this. So I love that. Yeah. So I loved Millie's character. She's a quirky little girl. She likes her little Rubik's Cube. She does these competitions with that, and she's always carrying it around. I thought that was a really fun little detail about her. It made her very interesting. I think this book would appeal to, it appealed to my son, who's 9 years old. He loved it. And then, kids, it also kind of encourages STEM indirectly. You don't even know it's happening. Again, you're teaching without doing it overtly. So I love that.
And that was kind of Amelia's big MO, if you will, at Purdue. She was on staff there, adjunct faculty, and lived in the dorm. Even I can't imagine having her as kind of a dorm mom. But that was her, her reason for being there was to push or to help promote the female students into engineering and science and math. And I will say the Rubik's Cube competition are based on my second born, my son. Some people, travel for baseball or whatnot. We traveled for Rubik's Cube competitions. He competed regionally and nationally. And so lots of the little tidbits where he could, solve one-handed in 15 seconds are actually based on my kid who's now in college. But we would go to these competitions and there would be maybe 300 middle school boys And then off to the side, there'd be two girls sitting at a table, giggling by themselves, waiting for their turn, their event or their heat to compete. And I will never forget. In fact, I kind of snuck a picture of this one girl in her little hoodie and ponytail. And I thought, I want to know her story. I want to write a book for them, for those girls. And so, and that's about the same time, and this might answer a question earlier, but it's about the same time that we took the road trip to Kansas to the house. And so I just thought, I wonder if I could mesh the two ideas. And that's one thing I think with writing, it's so important to tell your stories and not, so many times we let fear stop us.
Yes.
But I don't know who else would have thought to merge Rubik speed cubing with Amelia Earhart, right? But that's just what happened to be going on in my life at the time. And the more I dug, the more I found out that, hey, Amelia wanted girls in STEM and STEAM. So I thought, why not? And so that's
perfect. It's
how
perfect. It's relevant. It's relatable. My son certainly related to it because he runs around with his Rubik's Cube. And I'm sure the little girls out there will be picking up their Rubik's Cubes too because of it. That's so fun.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so too. I also liked the father character and how you portrayed him as just sort of this loving, sweet man. And I also now, I guess, get the connection because he is, he carries around this CPR doll. He teaches CPR, and that's a little quirky too that he's carrying this thing around. But I loved that you created this warm and loving, supportive father character because that's the husband that I have, who's a warm and loving father and always there for his kids. Where did you, was that important to you? Obviously it was. Tell me where that comes from.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. In fact, between this and my debut novel, the mom is struggling like with grief and depression, is in bed all the time. And so I had to tell my own mom, like, I promise I do not have anything against. I had a great experience as a kid, but it is kind of funny how we kind of gravitate towards those roles. I don't know. You can't help what you write just is what comes out. But yes, I absolutely wanted a loving, kind, caring, understanding, kind of nerdy, father. I think that's what I can relate to. And of course, the CPR mannequins just made me laugh and were fun and made me remember nursing school. And we would name ours. And anyway, that was just fun for me to include. Yeah.
Yeah, and so those are the things I love. And then there was the one question I had, and you know what? I'm just going to read it because it was on page 18. And I was like, well, I hope this gets resolved. But so Millie is getting dropped off at Amelia Earhart's house for this weekend, and they're doing their goodbyes. And she says, Dad and I weren't great at goodbyes or at being apart. It was one of the not so funny side effects of Mom's move. I was barely 10 when she left, 10 when she showed us her career meant more to her than her family. And then she goes on to talk about sort of the emotional effect that's had on her. Mm-hmm. And so that gave me pause because, here you have this great book that's highlighting, all of the wonderful things that women have done in aviation. But as a mom myself, I had a full career. My eldest son, pinned my wings on my chest when I graduated from high school. So I had them the whole time I was flying. And I'm a big advocate and kind of mentor to, promote women having an aviation career and also having children. So
for sure.
On the other hand, as a writer, I do understand that we have to create inner conflict for our characters that is relevant to the story. So tell me about that decision.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely it, as I needed the inner conflict and struggle. And unfortunately, it does happen in real life, that parents do leave families and pursue other interests and originally, this is interesting. This is what happens. The journey of a writer is you rewrite manuscripts. But originally the mom suffered from alcoholism. And so she was unable to fly for that way. because Amelia Earhart's own father was an alcoholic, and he was removed from the family, which is part of the reason that Amelia and her sister lived at her grandparents' home, which is the house in Atchison, is because they needed to be removed from the home for part of a while, which is very much true for many children. It's lots of their realities, and sadly. But my editor said your overall writing voice and tone is more lighthearted, and which I get. I do have some quirky elements. So she said, I think that might not be a good balance, or might be too heavy for your natural writing voice. So I was like, okay. So I had to pivot, and we came up with moving for her career and having like another love interest in the aviation world, which was, I think I ended up giving her a boyfriend, and that's what she ended up moving away. But yeah, it is hard, and there is a rub, and we could spend a whole hour, I think, talking on this, because there is that women can have it all slogan, but it's really, really, it is, in actuality, it's really, really difficult to be the top in your field and the absolute best mom and there for absolutely everything. And things have to give, but you can absolutely be loving and there for your child. And I think they absolutely need to see us working and following our passions and doing what we were made to do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I get it. I get the choice. And so for any teachers or librarians that are out there, I mean, the women in aviation are already an example for their children, but just make sure that the kids understand that just because this mom decided she had to leave her family to have a career in aviation, you don't have to. There are compromises for sure. Yeah. Right. And what you just said about kids like seeing their parents working and fulfilling, their goals, it can be a struggle, and sometimes you bring your stress home. There was a great article that I read by a college classmate of mine that talked about modeling joy for your children. And, I've always been conscious of that. Like, even when I'm feeling stress, when I was on active duty at work, just to make sure that my children, that's not all they saw at home, because I did love my job, and I loved flying, and I wanted them to see that too. So, yeah. And
I think so much of it is too cultural, and maybe where you live. And, I grew up in the South. There's a whole lot more pressure, I guess. And I grew up in church, and there was a whole lot more pressure around me. Many, many, many more women, as soon as they had their first child, stayed home. And so that's been, not that one way is right or wrong or better or the other, but it is interesting. It is interesting to watch, and you just have to be still and listen and do what's best for you and your family. Yeah,
that's right. I agree. So what do you hope the kids take away from this book?
Oh goodness, that for kids, that they're capable and smart and able to do whatever they set their minds to do. They can solve problems. They can think critically. The girls absolutely need to be in the places where science and math and engineering and aviation are happening. And I'm so excited that we're seeing more and more of that, even at NASA, electing, directors and different positions. And I really try to limit my time on social media, but that has been one of the great joys, is finding all of these amazing female scientists and flyers. And that's been a real joy to follow, just to meet and follow people who are interested in the same things.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't very active on social media before I started this book review project. And then, so when I did get on Instagram, I only followed mostly women in aviation, and now other writers and children's writers and illustrators. And so when I get on there, I'm just inspired, you know? Yeah,
It is neat.
endlessly.
You can kind of curate your own, your
Yeah.
own list or bubble of people with like interests and
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the way I'm using it anyway. So I enjoy it.
me too. Yeah.
So tell me about your other books.
My other books, my first is novel for kids. Again, 8 to 12 is Valonia Beebe Takes Charge. Very much set in the South. In fact, her name, Valonia and Beebe, are two towns outside of Little Rock, which is where I was born. So I took her name from a road sign, an exit sign. But she helps stray animals. Her mom is an obituary writer for the town paper. But like I said before, her mom is depressed. So Valonia takes over her mom's job on the sly and starts writing the obituaries for the paper, and the hilarity ensues. But she's just trying to be responsible, and she's juggling a little too many balls at once.
That sounds
Trying
super
not to
fun.
drop 'em. Yeah. So it's a little maybe on the younger side, not quite a little younger than the Amelia book.
Okay.
And then Koala Is Not a Bear. This is my first picture book, which has been really funny to meet all my Australian and New Zealand readers to Skype over there. Have to set my clock for that one.
Yeah.
But that's been fun because, here in the States, we call koala bears bears, and they're marsupials. No,
Yeah.
they're not bears. And then this one was fun too. Rover Throws a Party, based on Curiosity Rover. And then
Which is another picture book. Yeah.
Yeah,
For
sorry.
anybody who's not watching. Yeah.
Yep, and it has real rover facts. So NASA released all their images right when I was going in the edits for this book, so I could get them on online. So the back matter has actual images and facts. And I did get to work with one of the beauties of social media is I reached out to one of the scientists who helped design the rover, and so she helped me proof the book, and we kind of got to be friends, and that was really, really fun.
That's awesome.
This book was a joy to write. Once I saw the newspaper article that the scientist at Goddard had programmed it to hum Happy Birthday to itself. It was the first song played in space. I thought, that sounds like a picture book. So a lonely, isolated rover has no one to come to his birthday party.
That's
And it
so
came
great.
out. Yeah, it came out the week of the pandemic when everything's shut down. So we were isolated and my rover was isolated.
Out in space all on his own.
I know. Irony.
That's great. So what are you working on now?
Right now, I do have some airplanes in my new book, and I hope a couple of the Amelia Six girls, or maybe one character, can make a cameo. And that's about all I can say, but it might be even more STEM than the Amelia Six, and it's another mystery, and I'm very, very excited. So I've been researching Hercules C-17s. So that's been really
fun.
That's been really, really fun. Yeah. And then I hope to set another novel in South Arkansas, just in my home state. So I'm kind of digging into some ghost lore around there. I like ghosts. Maybe it's the time of year, October. So that's on the horizon.
That is so great. So I want to transition into talking more specifically about writing, and I usually split the interviews up. But before I do that, I wanted to say thank you so much for bringing your creativity and bringing all these fun ideas together. I love that. It's what I do in my writing as well. But bringing them to aviation and giving Amelia a new twist. It's really fun.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And